Okay, hello. Welcome to my subclass tier list for the final shape. I've thought a lot about this tier list for a hot minute now. I made a whole organized list, which we're gonna go through and talk about. The different strengths and weaknesses of the subclasses in the game. Overall, going into the final shape, I'll say two big things. One of them being that Prismatic is really strong. Prismatic outclasses a lot of the classes in the game, which is why half of this tier list mentions that many of the subclasses are outclassed by Prismatic. Another thing is I think most of the subclasses in the game are in like a good general spot. So even if I say a subclass is not that great or put it lower on the list, I think anything above this good but prismatic outclasses tier is a good subclass that you could use pretty much anywhere in the game. It doesn't really matter a whole bunch, but I figured I would just make a list compiling my thoughts and the order in which I would put them in viability wise, because you could use subclasses in like this tier or like this tier, but at the end of the day, if you want to win and we want to have an easier time, best in the game is going to be where the subclasses you're going to want to go to. So let's start it off with Strand Hunter. Strand Hunter is the weakest subclass in the game, I think, by a not by a significant margin, but it doesn't really offer anything crazy. Threaded specters are definitely strong. They're like a little clone buddy, but since Prismatic Hunter has them, I don't really consider them a crazy part of the kit that is super necessary, since you could probably just make a better setup with them on Prismatic. And outside of that, the only real thing I think the subclass has is the grapple points and the super. You could set up a shit ton of grapple points with that super, which makes encounters like Crota's and first encounter really easy, because you could go to the end and make a whole bunch of grapple points for your teammates. Outside of that, though, the thing is again, it's not a bad subclass. It just doesn't have anything that really makes it like an end game meta relevant subclass, and something has to be at the bottom of the list. Uh, so it's Strand Hunter. Unfortunately, it just does not offer anything super unique or super good outside of the grapple point shenanigans, which is not bad. It's good, but it doesn't do enough to keep it outside of the bottom spot of the list. I'm gonna talk about Arc Titan next. A little bit of Striker Titan. Arc Titan, like most of the Arc subclasses, as you'll see, is very, very outclassed by pretty much all of the prismatic. Like the prismatic subclasses have the strengths of the Arc subclasses. Uh, through like, sorry, they have the strengths of the Arc subclasses, but uh they don't have as many the weaknesses. Like the reason the arc subclasses are generally not that amazing in the game is due to the fact that they don't have a lot of survivability, but they have a lot of offensive utility. They have very strong ability sets and a good ability spam and stuff like that. But they kind of lack survivability typically. Striker Titan kind of just doesn't really bring much to the table in the current meta. Pretty much anything you could do on this class can be done on Prismatic. Curious the Falling Star can be done on Prismatic, and even then, Twilight Arsenal's better than it. And then you have Heart of Most Light or Point Contact Cannon Brace. Again, both of which can be done on Prismatic, especially Point Contact Cannon Brace. I think it is really strong on Prismatic. Yeah, though this again, these subclasses down here, just they don't offer anything crazy that other subclasses in the game don't offer. So yeah, I'm not gonna linger too much on Arc Titan. Next, Stasis Titan. Behemoth is kind of whatever. This subclass is super hit or miss. I feel like of these three subclasses in the bottom, it's definitely the best, especially due to the Stasis update. But I also feel like the Stasis update hasn't really done much for any of the Stasis classes. The main thing the Stasis update did was it gave each of the generation or the what's it called, the harvest aspects frost armor, and the ability to build into that, which isn't bad. But this subclass already had a different kind of damage resist, and they basically just swapped out one damage resist for the other. And this one's more consistent, and Stasis Titan could actually build it up better. But at the end of the day, pretty much all you're doing on this class is making a whole bunch of crystals, and crystals are not very strong in endgame content. My personal favorite build for this what's called class is a Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap. I like to just spam Diamond Lances, make a whole bunch of crystals with that, and then get Frost Armor off of that. It's not bad. Another subclass though, where The diamond lens thing is done better on prismatic, and you could also stack frost armor easier on prismatic due to the one aspect that gives you the yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Fuck. I forgot the name of the aspect that you, but you know the aspect I'm talking about, the one that gives you the frost armor off orb pickup. Anyway, this subclass is okay. Most of the strengths of it are on Prismatic Titan. The super's okay, but outside of that, this subclass just doesn't really do a crazy amount. Anyway, we're done with the bottom tier. I think these three subclasses are basically irrelevant in the current game. A Strand Hunter might be occasionally good for an encounter or two due to the grapples, and these two are definitely, I'd say, stronger generally than this subclass. But also, they're not really that great, and most of the strengths of them can be seen in other subclasses. Let's move on to the subclasses that I actually consider pretty good, but are also still outclassed by Prismatic, starting with Stasis Hunter. Stasis Hunter is okay. This is pretty much just a Dusk Fields grenade spam class. You just throw a whole bunch of Dusk Fields with the no grasps, and get a whole bunch of Frost Armor. You stack Frost Armor really well. Um, you get a whole bunch of Dusk Fields, which are actually pretty good for crowd control, especially if you have the big ones. And you also have Shatter Skating, which I'd say is the biggest boon of the subclass. I think Skating keeps this class out of the lower tiers because it's probably one of the best movement options in the game outside of well skating. And like if you're a hunter, like you switch this subclass for pretty much any jumping puzzle in the game or any kind of section where you need to move fast. Yeah, not too bad. This subclass has decent crowd control and damage resist, and the movement is very strong. Does it really offer anything super crazy like offensive or utility wise? Not really. I know the class is pretty good with Lucky Pants, due to the one aspect where when you chuck the melee, it reloads your gun. But outside of that, it's an all right subclass. Not really much to say about it. Again, these subclasses are good, but like you could do all the same things pretty much on Prismatic. You got the movement due to like grapples, ascension, shit like that on Prismatic, and you also have Duskfield setups that you could do on that class as well. So it's okay. Let's move on to Void Titan. Void Titan's okay. I think this subclass is just whatever. This was my favorite subclass in the game for the longest time, and it could be with the right buffs and changes, but it doesn't really do much in the current sandbox. It kind of just exists, and that's it. I really like. I wish I had more to say about it. The entire subclass pretty much just is based around giving your teammates void overshields and or like spamming like pretty strong grenades. But also at the same time, like you can't build into either of these nearly as hard as you can build into other subclass fantasies. Void overshields are pretty weak, I'd say overall, and yeah, it's fun to spam strong vortex grenades, for instance. But outside of that, this subclass doesn't really offer a crazy amount. I think its best builds are stuff like Bastion and offensive bulwark to just give yourself a whole bunch of grenades and teammates overshields. And yeah, that's pretty much. I mean, that's the main one I think of. This subclass, I feel like specifically also has probably the weakest exotic selection in the entire game. Uh, like the best exotic for it is like Heart of Most Light, which is not even a subclass specific thing. If you want like a subclass specific one, maybe Doomfang Pauldron, but it's not even that. Like that is not a great exotic. This subclass is just okay. The two builds I have here, this Vexcalibur one's more of just like a for fun build, but you pretty much just get to spam grenades because Vexcalibur keeps your shield up 100% of the time. And the defensive bulwark Bastion with Aeon Safe, it's just team over shields, make your teammates some heavy with finishers. That's it. This subclass is extremely whatever. Definitely better than the stuff below it, but not by much. Anyway, Arc Warlock. Arc Warlock is super underrated. This subclass is kind of like this was for a while most people's like definitive like worst subclass in the game. It's gotten a lot of changes and a lot of buffs that people may have not realized, and it's just really strong. It's probably the single strongest like crowd control class in the game. You just chuck abilities like storm grenades or pulse grenades alongside having what's it called, being able to give your teammates arc buddies, which when you're amplified do a lot of damage. And due to the ionic traces, this subclass just pretty much always has abilities. You always have something to chuck out, something that's jolting and killing a whole bunch of ads. Like this was my favorite onslaught subclass for the longest time. Again, this is another subclass where the strengths of it have been taken by Prismatic, which is why I think it's not nearly as good nowadays. Like you could just make the same build on Prismatic with like storm grenades. But it's not a bad class. It's pretty good. Yeah, I'll say the main two things, the main two builds I mentioned here are Fallen Sunstar, which pretty much just like gives your Ionic Traces a huge boost, so you just always have abilities. Or you can go Vesper of Radius to make your rifts like blind and damage enemies, which is pretty good, especially when you're like surrounded and stuff like that. General strong subclass, again, outclassed by Prismatic. We'll move on. Void Warlock. This is definitely a strong subclass in the game, but I feel like if there's any one subclass that kind of got super outclassed by Prismatic, it's Voidlock. Prismatic took Voidlock's single best aspect, which is Feed the Void, and Feed the Void's great. Like Devour on any ability kill is so good. You get so many grenades due to it, so much survivability. So much of this kit is like as strong as it is because of Feed the Void. But the big thing is Void Warlock has Prismatic Warlock has Feed the Void as well. So it makes this kit like just significantly less strong in my mind. Two big builds here. We got Controverse Holds, Feed the Void, Chaos Accelerant, just super big weaken grenades that you get back every few seconds. Super strong. Or you can go Briar Binds with Child of the Old Gods for constant weaken. And like a pretty strong crowd control, honestly. Like you could just kind of put a few buddies out there, lock down the entire battlefield. Not a bad subclass, and it definitely is like Nova Bomb's really good right now. Nova Bomb's one of the strongest supers in the game. But again, pretty much everything this subclass can do can be done on Prismatic. All the weakened stuff, the super, the devour, survivability, all that. So yeah, we move on. Stasis Warlock is the final, or not the final one, but this is just another subclass that I kind of feel like is outclassed by Prismatic Lock. Pretty much cold snaps, which are I'd say the strongest part of stasis lock. With Ozymancies, they exist on prismatic lock, and I would argue that they're better on prismatic lock. You might be dropping ice flared bolts, which I think is like this subclass's main claim to fame currently. But like as a trade off, you get Devour, which allows you to get those nades back so much quicker and just make a whole bunch of Bleak Watchers on prismatic if you really want to. My old stasis setup I actually replaced with prismatic recently because it's better. Sorry. And you get better supers too and stuff on prismatic. Yeah, Shade Binder's definitely not bad. I think the main build is the Ozymancy Bleak Turret or Bleak Watcher Turrets one. Super strong GM build, but at the end of the day, you could do the same thing on Prismatic and have an easier time with more survivability. So we move on. All right, Arc Hunter. Arc Hunter is the final subclass that's going to be in this like good but outclassed tier. This subclass, honestly, in my opinion, used to be like close to the top of the list, just due to like the survivability and the dodge punch loop. Uh, yeah, unfortunately, this subclass is super outclassed by Prismatic just due to the fact that Prismatic took Combination Blow. If Prismatic did not have Combination Blow, I think this subclass would still be very strong and viable. It has one of the strongest ability loops in the game due to being able to dodge punch over and over again to stack Combination Blow and pretty much kill anything with one punch. But unfortunately, that is not the case anymore because Prismatic could do it, and Prismatic could do it way better than this class can. For builds, you got stuff like Assassin's Cowl or Liar's Handshake with the dodge punch setup, which is pretty nice. I'm also going to mention, I don't remember the name of it, but there's the new Ascension exotic where when you jolt people, you get damage resist, which I actually think is pretty strong. That's definitely worth giving a try on this subclass. But yeah, pretty much. I mean, this subclass is super outclassed by what's it called? By Prismatic. Probably one of the most outclassed subclasses in the game. Unfortunately, just everything this subclass had power wise is on Prismatic and then Fold, and then yeah, it's way stronger. Anyway, We move on. All right, now we're in the strong category. I think these subclasses from this point upwards all still have a place in the game, even with Prismatic being in the game. Starting with Solar Titan. Solar Titan is super basic and kind of bland. I'm a Titan man, just for reference. Was probably my most used subclass for a while in the game, just because it provides you with super strong survivability, basically for free. You kind of just you have healing nade, you have the hammer, which you could like bonk people with to heal yourself and make sunspots. Sunspots are a super strong tool. Um, yeah, this subclass is basically just a super survivability class, and then alongside that, you have Pyro Gales for a strong damage super. You can just go, Roaring Flames, Sit the Seps, and bonk the shit out of people. But yeah, strong subclass, very strong survivability. It doesn't really do much for like team play or anything else outside of that, though. It's just a survivable subclass, and that's kind of it. Yeah, it doesn't really offer too much outside of just living, which is definitely good. Like it's definitely stronger than everything below it, but it's just okay. Anyway, Strand Warlock. Broodweaver is super strong. I think this class is pretty much just like the DPS king of Warlocks. Again, outside of Prismatic, because I think Prismatic is really strong currently, but this subclass has just a lot of strong tools. You have the ability to like eat your strand grenade or eat your suspend grenade to just to get yeah, it's Mindspun Invocation, that's what it's called. To just like suspend pretty much the whole battlefield. And you compare that with like something like Necrotic Grips and Osteo's Trigger or Thorn to just run like destroy pretty much everything on the battlefield. You also have like Weave Walk for like survivability. And now too with the main thing that I forgot to mention is Euphony exists now, which I've been using a lot recently, and it is very strong with Euphony, especially the Swarmer setup. Like I have two setups here. I have Wander and Mindspun Invocation with Necrotic Grips or Mitodoxia for just a whole bunch of suspend, crowd control, that kind of thing. And then you also have stuff like Swarmers with Weave Walk and Threat of Ascent for super strong boss damage, specifically with Euphony. Yeah, though this subclass is probably one of the most, again, like feels a lot like Solar Titan, where it's very consistent. It's got a lot of tools, a lot of AOE, survivability, pretty much everything you want in a subclass. Yeah, pretty good. We move on. Next is actually Prismatic Titan. People might be surprised to see a Prismatic Titan this low, but I think Prismatic Titan is a very strong subclass. I think there's one Titan subclass though that most people know about that I think is just more consistent and better in general. Prismatic Titan also only has one real build, and it's a super strong build. I've used it pretty much this whole season. But at the same time, I will not deny that the power of something like Strand Titan. Anyway, though, yeah, Prismatic Titan with Knockout and Consecration, Frenzy Blade, uh, you know, in most light, and then Star Eater, Syntheseps, or Contact, pretty much just gives you the ability to spam consecrations like on cooldown, and you get a whole bunch of them, and it deals a lot of damage, and you get Transcendence super fast with the setup, and you could also have a pretty strong damage super in Twilight Arsenal. I think this subclass is quite strong. Probably the second best. Definitely the second best Titan subclass in the game. A lot of survivability, the ability to just punch and kill everything, even in GMs. I was doing it with Indisgraced earlier. But yeah, this subclass is quite strong. Not really much to say outside of what I've said. I mean, it has one. The big problem with this subclass it does not really have a lot of team play, and it has like one combination that's strong, and everything else in the subclass is really mid. Like, oh, one thing I will mention too is this is probably the best subclass to use Hazardous Propulsion on, because it has a lot of survivability, and you have Thruster, which is the main thing you want to use Hazardous Propulsion on. I'm just mentioning that because Hazardous Propulsion on Titans probably their best exotic right now, or one of, like that, and probably like Syntheseps and the class item are probably their best. So just quickly mention that. Yeah, though, super strong subclass, versatile super, good ability loop, a lot of crowd control, killing, everything like that. Survivability too. It's a great subclass. We move on. Next is Gunslinger. Gunslinger is kind of insane. The Gunslinger is another subclass where it's definitely not outclassed by Prismatic, but the main thing that's strong about Gunslinger is Celestial Nighthawk with Golden Gun, right? Like Celestial Nighthawk, Marksman, Golden Gun, pretty much just one hits like anything in the game, chaps, shit like that. Great for boss DPS. Yeah, pretty strong subclass. I think the main thing this subclass has going for it currently is the same thing all the solar subclasses have going for them currently, which is Ember of Empyrean. Ember of Empyrean is really strong, and then alongside healing nades and a solar weapon, you can just keep consistent restoration up 100% of the time, which I think is extremely broken. You also have a lot of good aspects, stuff like knock them down for consistent just melees back to back to back, powered melees specifically. And yeah, very strong subclass. Especially one thing I'd mentioned is a Still Hunt. Still Hunt's broken, especially with Celestial Nighthawk. Definitely the second best subclass to do this setup on, but yeah, still a really, really strong setup with survivability due to Ember, Empyrean, and healing grenades. And yeah, you could also switch to stuff like Assassin's Cowl if you want more survivability. Yeah, really strong subclass, great damage. So good for damage and survivability. Anyway, let's move into the top 5. My top 5 is probably pretty similar to most people's top 5 in the game, but we're starting off with Night Stalker Hunter. Void Hunter is insane. This subclass has pretty much every tool that I think you want in a subclass. It's the only subclass that has access to permanent invisibility for your entire fire team, which as the content in the game gets harder, becomes way more valuable. I think this setup is insane for GMs. Like Omnioculus alongside Trapper's Ambush, Vanishing Step. Really, really strong for GMs, especially since it gives you your allies damage resist while you're invis. You also have many people saw it last season with Onslaught. Orpheus Rig, Deadfall Hunter is Deadfall Tether is insane. You get that super back in literal seconds, and it just crowd controls the hell out of the enemies. I'll say that setup specifically is also present on Prismatic, and it's a lot better on Prismatic. But at the same time, it's still really strong on this one, and obviously Falcon's Stylus Executioner, stuff like that. This subclass is really strong. I think the main thing that keeps it relevant and not outclassed by Prismatic is the Omnioculus setup, because these other two setups can be made on Prismatic and probably made better on Prismatic. But yeah, really, really strong subclass. All the Void classes have access to Devour on Orb Pickup, which is really strong. So this subclass has pretty much everything you want. You have the ability to give your entire team invisibility, survivability, crowd control, everything. Anyway, we move on. Strand Titan. This is my favorite subclass in the game. I'm biased because I'm a Titan man. I've used it to solo flawless a lot of dungeons. But yeah, this class is insane. So much fun. What it has is pretty much two big builds. One of them being the Banner of War, Into the Fray, Syntheseps, or Worm God setup. Pretty much just a super strong melee build with consistent abilities. Alongside, if using Navigator and Tractor Cannon, you could do nutty damage, super insane damage. You use that 1-2 punch shotgun, you're gonna be dealing probably the highest single solo damage in the game, which is why you see most speedrunners use this setup when it comes to pretty much anything. I mean, yeah. Outside of that, this subclass also has a Bant Leap with Drenger's Lash. Definitely better on this subclass than it is on Prismatic, mostly due to the fact that when you kill suspended targets, with I think it's Threat of Mind, you get pretty much your whole barricade back in 1 to 2 kills. So you can just keep spamming these strong crowd control barricades. Not nearly as strong as the Banner of War build is the reason this subclass is top 5. But yeah, this build is insane. Extremely strong subclass. Super strong melees, great survivability, and crowd control if you go the Bant Leap route. Yeah. Also, this subclass specifically, I think is amazing because of the ability to do Tractor Cannon in a team, but also deal competitive damage. I love Tractor Cannoning and then doing the the Strand melee combo while playing this class. Anyway, we move on. Top three now. Solar Warlock. Everybody should have seen this one coming. Solar Warlock is broken. Yeah, this subclass has received considerable nerfs, especially this season due to the well nerf. Yeah, the well is still a good option. Honestly, though, Song of Flame kind of replaced well in my mind. You could use Song of Flame alongside the new healing turret build, which is broken by the way. The healing turret build. So Speaker Sight. Pretty much you throw out a healing turret, right? And if you have Touch of Flame, it gives you restoration times 2 and your teammates restoration times 1, and it just keeps shooting like pretty much. I think it's like a whole bunch of times. You keep proccing Ember Benevolence off of that, which gives you back the turret before you even lose it. Basically giving you infinite survivability, and it's a lot of healing. It's basically stronger than a Well of Radiance, but it's your grenade ability. This build is extremely strong. For those of you who are still living in the past, you also have Sunbracers, which was, I think, a lot better last season, but still a really strong build. You can go Touch a Flame with Heat Rises to get yourself ×2 restoration and keep it up with Ember of Empyrean, alongside having a super strong ability loop just through being able to throw the melee, chuck a whole bunch of grenades, and keep doing that back and forth. If anybody's seen Atheon damage too, I mean, you've all seen the Verity Brow fusion grenade setup with Touch of Flame. Yeah, pretty much. Solar Warlock has like everything I think a subclass needs, and even with the nerf, it's still one of the strongest subclasses in the game. I mean, you got the damage, you got the survivability, the team support, and I think these three builds here will honestly carry you through like any form of content. Now we're in top two. I wrote a lot for Prismatic Warlock. Prismatic Warlock is insane. I think the subclass has so much diversity. The reason why half these subclasses down here are outclassed is due to classes like Prismatic Lock and Prismatic Hunter. Prismatic Lock has Feed the Void, you have Hellion, you have Bleak Watcher, and then you have a whole bunch of very strong abilities to go alongside those aspects. I mean, the fact that you could pair Storm Grenades with like Feed the Void is insane in and of itself. Like it's so much ad clear, survivability. You have damage through both like Nova Bomb. You have team play through. You can go like a heal nade setup. Like everything good I've talked about on Warlock so far can be built on this class. And like I wrote a lot here for the builds, right? You can go Getaway Artist for the double turret setup, which I'm pretty sure everybody's seen, where you eat the turret. Sorry, you eat your arc grenade to get a turret and Bleak Watcher. Mitodoxia is also really good on this class. The exotic bond has so many good options. Ozymancies, I think, is the big one. You chuck a grenade and you basically get half of it back as long as you hit it. And then you could do like Harmony or Verity for either damage or more supers. And honestly, like either of them are really good options because you want the grenade to do more damage to kill more stuff. And Harmony, I mean, there's so many good supers on this subclass. Yeah, though. You also have the Ozymancy setup that I was talking about, which basically replaces Stasis Lock. You can have Cold Steps with Feed the Void and Bleak Watcher. Yeah, and then for damage, you have Apotheosis Starters, which is probably the strongest damage setup in the game without using any guns. Like you could pop a super, like a Nova Bomb, and then you just chuck abilities for a while. And it's great for setting up something like Euphony. Yeah, extremely strong subclass. This subclass basically has no weaknesses. You could use it over pretty much every Warlock class except for maybe Solar. I think Solar, because of Ember Benevolence, like Speaker Sight's probably better on this class. Outside of that, though, this class is broken. Yeah. Finally, number one, Prismatic Hunter. Everybody knows this is number one. Anybody that knows me, that knows the game in general, currently knows how strong this subclass is. It has two main builds, those being Celestial Nighthawk alongside something like Still Hunt and Golden Gun. For the single best like a damage build in the game. We already talked about it on Solar, but Celestial Nighthawk alongside Still Hunt does a whole bunch of damage, especially against a boss like the Witness. Super strong setup. The other thing that the subclass has is combination below setups with Stylus Executioner and Winter Shroud. You basically take the benefits of Assassin's Cowl and just put them on top. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, no thing. What's it called? My recording cut out for some reason. Anyway, what I was referring to before, was the combination blow setups with Silence Executioner and Winter Shroud. Pretty much, you could use an exotic like Liar's Handshake or the exotic class item with Liar's Handshake alongside this setup, while having extremely strong survivability. This setup just does a whole bunch of melee damage. You can get the invis off of Stylish and Winter Shroud, and it basically gives you an infinite ability loop while also just dealing a whole bunch of damage and being able to live pretty much infinitely. The class item with something like Caliban's and Liars or Syntheseps is so strong for that setup. Anyway, yeah. Outside of that, I have a few more builds here. Not nearly as important. Everybody knows why Prismatic Hunter's the like. I don't really have to explain why Prismatic Hunter's the current best subclass in the game. I think until this subclass sees significant nerfs, this will be the easiest best subclass in the game for a while. I think being able to like nerfing the melee setups on this class, and then also maybe giving Still Hunt another go around of changes. I think then the subclass will not be the best in the game, but currently I'd say it's the strongest in the game. So yeah. Anyway, Um, that is my list. If you guys want to see any more lists, anything like that, subscribe. And leave a comment as to what you want me to make a list on next. I tried to have this like be a pretty, like scripted thing, but at the same time, I kind of just ended up rambling. So that's typically just what I do. So yeah, if you guys want to see like I don't know, like exotic weapons or armor tier list, maybe like a raid tier list, I'd be down to do that. Anyway, this is my final list. Again, not the gospel. Like I think pretty much all the subclasses here have some kind of strength or viability in the game. Um, yeah, though these are my thoughts. Yeah. All right, have a good one. Like sub peace.